Have you ever had an idea that sounded great on paper but turned out to be pretty bad during the execution? I know I have. Look at the first videos uploaded on this channel and you'll see my examples. Sometimes you have these magnificent thoughts. You plan and plan and plan to ensure everything goes smoothly. But when your hard work comes to fruition, it turns out that both your idea sucked and your finished product sucks even more. It happens, we brush ourselves off and we move on. WrestleMania II, I feel, was one of these great ideas on paper that turned out unsatisfactory. The inaugural WrestleMania show is brought up pretty often, being the show that kicked off an entertainment phenomenon and all that. While the in-ring competition wasn't great at the first Mania, it still was a very important show and, more importantly, it was a huge success. So why don't we really talk about its sequel? Why does the WWE also keep relatively quiet about this event? I mean, it never will have the same importance of WrestleMania 1, but the story of a returning sporting spectacular should have enough to make a story about, right? So here was the plan. WrestleMania 1 was such a massive success that Vince McMahon felt he could sell out 3 arenas in one night. That's right, WrestleMania would be in 3 different cities across America, all in one evening. Uniondale in New York, Rosemont in Illinois, and LA in California. Also, this would be the only WrestleMania in history to take place on a Monday. On paper, Vince McMahon felt he could take WrestleMania all across the United States in one night, selling out these multiple venues while bringing them all together to form a cohesive pay-per-view show. Each venue would have 4 matches with their own main event, and once the action stopped in the ring at a particular arena, giant screens would show the matches from the other locations. Vince felt this was a great idea on paper, but when you think about it, it actually sounds like the ramblings of an absolute lunatic. Now, before going on, we also have to give credit here where credit's due. This was back in 1986, and the WWF were broadcasting live from 3 locations and putting this all into one jam-packed show. Even by today's standards, there's a lot of room here for mistakes, so you have to admire the scale of the challenge. Vince McMahon felt he had enough stars, both in terms of wrestlers and celebrities, that he could sell out 3 arenas in one night, and just this gamble alone deserves some credit. Across the 3 venues, WrestleMania brought in around 40,000 paying customers, a sizable enough number at the time. WrestleMania 2 though, I feel, wasn't about selling tickets, it was about the WWF putting another huge mark on the American entertainment industry. Kinda like Vince McMahon said, well, if you thought WrestleMania 1 was big, wait until you see this. In the end though, it was a giant swing and a miss. In saying this, from a production standpoint, it is still quite interesting to watch. It's just a shame that the matches that took place were simply not that good. So the show featured 12 matches in total, 4 matches from each venue. The ideal way for this to happen, in a perfect world, would be alternating matches between each venue so the audience in attendance wouldn't be forced to watch giant screens for a prolonged period of time. The problem here though, especially in the mid-80s, is that this created a higher chance of live video feed issues. At the expense of the fans in attendance at each venue, it was decided that each arena would get just under an hour of live in-ring action, and once all the matches were done, it was over to the big screens for the remainder of the show. The WWF attempted to lay out the matches so that each venue would have a main event caliber match, so each venue would have a fair share of WWF stars. There were no dark matches either during these shows. Now, the regular thing to do here would be to go through the card match by match and talk about what went down and all that stuff in some sort of detail. However, I'm not going to do that for this video, and the reason behind this is simply because there isn't that much to say about the majority of matches here at WrestleMania 2. The intriguing thing about this show is the production, the scale of it all, and while I'd like to talk about each individual match with great detail and talk about the build-ups and all that stuff, there just isn't enough to say that would be of any interest. We will of course run down the whole card, but match analysis here will be kept to a minimum. This is for your benefit too. Also, this event was heavily edited for home video release. The version you see on the WWE Network, yes, it's edited mainly to cover up production errors and mistakes. I managed to find a copy of the original closed circuit feed of WrestleMania 2. That's right, an exact copy that was shown at closed circuit theatres and arenas across America. It doesn't get much more authentic than this, guys. So let's see the real version of WrestleMania 2, warts and all. This of course means that the screenshot quality here during this video is going to suffer, but hey, it's not like you watch these videos for the excellent cinematography anyway. So Vince McMahon kicks off the show in New York and introduces Susan St. James as his co-host. Actress Susan here was relatively big in the 70s and 80s, and more recently she has appeared in shows such as Suits. Vince then introduces Ray Charles, who is going to sing America the Beautiful here at WrestleMania. Honestly, I'm not exaggerating here, this is one of the better moments of WrestleMania 2. Ray's rendition here is excellent. We go over to Mean Gene Okerlund then, who's in Chicago, telling us that later on at that location we're going to see a battle royal. He sends us back to New York where the great Roddy Piper delivers a promo. Roddy Piper will be in the New York main event, taking on Mr. T in a boxing match. This is another highlight of the show. Piper's promo here is exceptionally good. Piper says if he gets knocked out by Mr. T, he would quit boxing, quit wrestling, and quit dating girls. The first match then from New York, we have Paul Orndorff versus Don Morocco. At the start of the match, Vince McMahon says that we're going to see comments made by both competitors made earlier in the evening, but there's no video footage here, instead we just hear audio. It sounds really out of place, but it is what it is. Susan St. James's commentary is already generic as hell, so let's write her off right now. There's no point going on about her lack of enthusiasm throughout the show. She isn't bad, but she isn't great either. Anyway, the crowd chants bullshit as the bell rings when both men are on the outside. It seems the match ends in a double countout, but we don't get an official announcement by Howard Finkel. Instead, he walks around the ring, looking confused, looking down outside the ring, as he has no idea what the official outcome of the match is supposed to be. The whole finish and the confusion afterwards was included in the normal home video release though. Mr. T's promo next, and during the promo we can overhear Howard Finkel in the background announcing the last match was a double countout. Hilarious.
All other dirty things
Ladies and gentlemen,
him and
in the previous
back in
bout,
Phoenix, Arizona. I don't play that stuff, but I'm telling you tonight.
Next we have George the Animal Steele versus Randy Savage. I am slightly biased here, I'm a fan of both Randy Savage and George Steele. If I take that out of the equation, then I do have to admit that both men were capable of a better match here. The beginning of the showdown is all about Savage running away from Steele, and when George gets him, he begins biting Savage's boots. When Savage picks up the pace, it does get better, but all in all, this is an attraction match, and if we base this match on the in-ring action, then yeah, it isn't great. Savage gets the win and retains the IC title. Mean Gene Okerlund next to promote the upcoming Battle Royal later in the night, and once again, during this promo, we can hear Howard Finkel announce the winner of the Savage vs Steele match. We go back to Vince McMahon and Susan St. James letting us know here that our next match will feature George Wells versus Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake gets the win with the DDT. It's a very subpar match, and afterwards Jake wraps his snake around Wells as George begins foaming at the mouth. Vince then introduces a video package that will give us a better understanding of the Piper vs Mr. T feud. After the video, Vince sends us over to LA where Jesse Ventura interviews Hulk Hogan. Just before this though, there's an awkward pause from Vince McMahon as the live timing seems to be slightly off. Joan Rivers is in the ring next, introducing the celebrity judges for the Mr. T vs Roddy Piper boxing match. This will be the main event for the New York portion of the show. Piper had a real life problem with celebrities like Mr. T coming into wrestling to take spots away from other deserving superstars. He had a legit beef with Mr. T here that's been well documented, but apart from this little bit of information, there's nothing really interesting here at all. It's a worked boxing match, main eventing a wrestling show in New York. Mr. T gets the win via disqualification in an ill-conceived main event, ending the New York portion of the show here on a real downer. So it's now time for the screens to come down in New York and we move over to the Chicago portion of the show. Before we get there though, the WWF plays an advert for all the merchandise available during intermission. Remember, this is the closed circuit feed that you're seeing here. This wasn't included on the home releases, so you're seeing some rare stuff here. When we go to Chicago, the WrestleMania introduction is played once again as Gorilla Monsoon and Mean Gene Okerlund welcome us to part 2. The first match is a women's championship match, Velvet McIntyre taking on the Fabulous Moolah. Moolah gets the win in an absolutely dire match. Nothing to say, it was a waste of time. Next is Corporal Kirshner versus Nikolai Volkov. The winner of the match will be allowed to raise their flag at the end of the showdown. Kirshner wins, and I must say, he was super over here with this audience, but it's another throwaway match. Next we have the NFL vs WWF Battle Royal. This is a match that WrestleMania 2 is kind of remembered for, along with the Mr. T vs Roddy Piper boxing match. Notable names here include Bruno Sammartino in his one and only WWF pay-per-view match, Bret Hart, the Iron Sheik, King Tonga, Tony Atlas, William the Refrigerator Perry, and eventual winner Andre the Giant. Bret Hart revealed that he and Ricky Steamboat were actually supposed to have a match here at WrestleMania 2, but Hercules ended up getting the nod instead of the Hitman. Apparently, Bret was crushed by the news. In saying that, both Bret and Jim Neidhart have a good showing here at WrestleMania 2. They stay in the Battle Royal until the very end. The British Bulldogs take on Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake, the only match that feels competitive during this entire WrestleMania broadcast. The Bulldogs picked up the win and the titles here, and the crowd is electric when the pinfall happens. WrestleMania 2 needed a match like this. Up until this point, the whole show had been severely lackluster. Ozzy Osbourne also brought the Bulldogs to the ring, a nice added bonus. So now it's time for the last portion of the show, live from LA. This should be the best part, right? Save the best to last and all that? Well, let's see. It's not like the New York portion or the Chicago portion had anything to really write home about. The show starts off again like it's a brand new broadcast. Vince takes us over to LA as we are introduced to our commentators for this portion, Jesse Ventura, Lord Alfred Hayes, and Elvira. Ricky Steamboat vs Hercules is our first match, and it isn't bad at all. Steamboat is always a joy to watch. His offense was unique here as always, and the pace is quite fast. Not a bad match at all with a predictable finish, but you do notice that the match is much better when Steamboat is on the offense. Something we notice early on here is that Jesse Ventura's headset seems to be defective. The audio quality is awful. Anyway, Steamboat gets the win. Jesse Ventura looks confused as hell when the cameras go on him here after the match. He wasn't prepared to transition into the next segment.
Right now? And now we're going to go to an interview conducted earlier by Lord
Alfred Hayes' microphone doesn't work during his interview with Hulk Hogan, causing the crowd to boo and the camera to flip back to the ring. We then hear the audio from the Hogan interview, but the cameras still stay in the arena as the next competitors make their way to the ring. They totally messed this up, and this has all been cut from the home video and WWE Network versions of the show. Many heroic battles have taken place at WrestleMania over the years, from the remarkable Bret Hart vs Steve Austin clash at WrestleMania 13, Daniel Bryan overcoming the odds at WrestleMania 30, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior going toe-to-toe in a winner-takes-all spectacle at WrestleMania 6. Strap yourself in, guys. The next time someone asks you what your favourite WrestleMania match is, you can sound like an absolute wrestling connoisseur by mentioning Adrian Adonis versus Uncle Elmer at WrestleMania 2. Now, I'll never take away anything from any wrestler who steps into the ring, and more so, I'll never badmouth anyone who can make money by performing on a stage like this, but there's no avoiding the reality here. This was absolute garbage on an insanely high level. Keep in mind, we are over 2 hours into the show here, and the WWF decided to put on this match this late into the game. It was bad. Adonis gets the win. Let's move on. Take 2 of the Hulk Hogan interview, and it seems we now have the combination of both video and audio, thank God. Terry and Hoss Funk versus Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog next. This sounds like it should be good, and in comparison to what we have already seen, it was decent. The Funk brothers get the win as the crowd continue to fill the arena with boos. Here's something interesting. We get to see these happy guys set up the cage around the ring for the main event. We are then shown a pre-tape that builds up the King Kong Bundy versus Hulk Hogan main event. And honestly, at this point in the show, I am so glad that this is all about to end. I feel emotionally drained after sitting through this, and at least we can hope for a good main event. This pre-tape is hilarious too, with Hogan showing us how hard he will work out in order to take out King Kong Bundy. Jesse Ventura interviews Bobby Heenan and King Kong Bundy next, and something that stands out here is that King Kong Bundy's promo makes much more sense than Hulk Hogan's. He just speaks better. The main event is next, and it's uneventful. It feels like a Saturday night's main event match, and remember, this was Hogan's first singles match at Mania. It should have been much more, but it was terribly mediocre. Hogan gets some time alone with Bobby Heenan after the match inside the cage, and after having his way with the brain, he atomic drops Bobby out of the ring. Work that out. The main event here sums up the whole event. It's underwhelming, and it should have been a lot more. The Bulldogs match was good, the Steamboat match was alright, but apart from this, nothing else can be recommended out of this entire show. The story of WrestleMania II then isn't about what happened in the ring, it was all about the scale of the show. Essentially, you have 3 mini events put together to make one giant wrestling spectacle. The only issue here was that it wasn't a wrestling spectacle. It wasn't good at all. As stated earlier though, credit has to be given for attempting something like this in 1986, and watching a show like this in late 2019 and picking it apart is indeed unfair. But in saying that also, WrestleMania 1 doesn't get the same bad rep that WrestleMania 2 gets, and neither does WrestleMania 3. The second WrestleMania here is an oddity. It isn't well remembered, and you can now understand why the WWE doesn't bring it up as often as other WrestleMania events of the 80s.